Let's take a look at a really neat feature within line quilting. Within line quilting, we can not only do just straight lines from point to point, or open curves or open lines from one end to another, closed paths. We can also, as we've shown in another video, we have the ability to save the pattern or save the outline that we set, and then use that in software to then do a fill. All of that is in line quilting, but we also have a curves feature in line quilting, and that comes in really, really handy when we're doing sashings or even blocks every now and then, where maybe you just you need to tack it down, you need to quilt it, but you don't want anything really, really fancy. Now, that's not to say that you can't do some pretty fancy looking things with curves quilting, and we're going to show you something really neat. But instead of just doing a stitch in the ditch or stitch in the area around the ditch or something like that, we can really plus it up, I guess would be the term. We can add a little bit more character into the quilt with this feature. So let's take a look at it. We choose line quilting, and we have our choices just like before, closed path and open path. Well, I want to show you something where, let's pretend the sashing strips, we have a sashing strip and a sashing, and where they intersect there's a rectangle. So I want to pretend we're going to be looking at that instance. So we are going to do a closed path for that. So if we look at my needle cam here, I've got that area shown right here, where this is our pretend intersection of a sashing strip that's going from left to right here, and one that's coming down vertically. And we want to quilt something out in this spot. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our points, and we're going to do it like we would when we're actually quilting. We're going to choose a point here, going to choose a point there, and I'm doing a pretty good job of looking at the inside tangent of these thread lines to the inside circle inner diameter of my foot, but my needle doesn't go directly through the center of the foot, so it's going to be a little off. That's one of the things I really need to align on this machine, is to make sure that my foot and my needle are concentric. It's not an easy thing to do on this particular machine, but one of these days I'll get to it. I've chosen my points, and I'm going to say done, and it's drawn that rectangle on the screen. But let's look at the buttons on the left hand side. We have save pattern and move to start. If I just wanted to quilt those lines, I just say move to start and we quilt those lines. But let's look underneath that. We have a button that looks like a pin cushion for pin cushioning in, and one that looks like it's going to balloon out. So I'm going to push the pin cushion button, and you notice that I've also, let me just unclick those check boxes. They were already clicked. So this is the way it would look when you first start with this function. You can see that it's pin cushioned in, and underneath I've got a number of steps. I have a little symbol that looks like a staircase, and the number N, or the letter N, which stands for the number of steps. So right now I have a pin cushion, which means in a value of -1. That's like a step size. And then the number of steps, I have only one step. Well, I can change that step number and say I wanted to put in 2 steps. You can see that it keeps the same offset and then adds steps in. So I can have 2 of those curves going into that area. I can also make it a little bit more dramatic by pressing the pin cushion button again, and it changes the spacing between those. Now, underneath the step area field where we choose the number of steps, we have a checkbox that says include straight lines. And including the straight lines means it will not only quilt the curves, but it will include the straight lines that are shown in red. And you know what, for this, let's do that. So we're going to include the straight line. We also have a feature called both sides. Now we're not going to choose that feature for this because it's a sashing and I think it might look a little bit odd. Maybe on your quilt it wouldn't look odd, but I think it would look odd if we chose that. But if we do choose it, you see it would do something like that. It's putting 2 lines on the inside and 2 lines on the outside. Not necessarily what I was going for here, but it might look good on something. It really might, because it just looks kind of cool. So I'm going to unclick both sides. Now underneath that we also have something called symmetric and alternating. Now symmetric means that it puts all the curves on the same side of the line. And alternating means it will go inside, then outside, then inside, then outside. So let's click that. We're going to click alternating, and you can see how that looks. See how it's gone from one side to the other side? Well, I want symmetric for this example. So we're ready to quilt this out. So let's do that. We can move to the start point. I'll pull up my bobbin thread and press go. Now remember, it's doing the straight lines first, and you can see this is why I need to, if you look at the needle cam there, you can see I need to align my needle to the foot. But this is a really, really quick way to add some nice character in those spots. It's very simple. You're not really designing a whole bunch of stuff standing up and trying to do this on the fly. It's a very quick, you know, I like this amount of offset and I like this number of steps. Click the points, boom, 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 and you're done. So that is something you can do in a rectangular sashing intersection. Now let's take another look at, and I'll get my bobbin thread up here. Let's take a look at doing something in triangles. A lot of times, you know, you have a block surrounded by, well, it's something like a square block surrounded by triangles, and it's in the shape of a star. And what do you put in that star? The little triangular points. A lot of times you go, oh man, I have to think of a design, and if it's a small triangle, if you try to fit a design in there or fill it, it comes out with an unequal density compared to what's in the center block. And you want to pay attention to that kind of stuff. You want to make sure that the densities are right along the quilt, so you don't get bunching and puckering and stuff like that. So here I've got a triangular area, and I am going to fill this, but I'm going to fill it with just a curve. I'm going to do a quick little offset inside there. I choose line quilting, and I'm going to do a closed path again. And now I'm going to be a little more careful with my foot. Now that I know that my needle does some weird stuff, I'm going to pay a little bit closer attention and try to do it better so that it just looks nicer. So I'm going to choose that as my first point right up there. And then this as my second point. And then my third point, I'm going to choose it right there. And I hope that's good. I wish I had a better way of doing that, but I don't yet. So, and let's see, I'm going to undo that last point, and I'm saying done. Perfect. And here I just want to do a, let's see, let me do, no, I only want to do that, but I want to do 3 times. I want to do 3 steps inside. Well, maybe I'm going to increase that to -2. Ooh, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of a neat look all in its own. And I was thinking I would just do curves, but the way those overlap, that's kind of interesting. And if I include the straight lines like I've got checked, that might look really good. So let's see how that quilts out. Move to the start point. and press go. And you know what? That looks pretty good. That's a very nice looking pattern inside there. And with a little bit more trial and error as you do, and I would say maybe do some practice quilting with this feature just off to the side, maybe, you know, through the batting and the backing only or something, just to get a feel of how all of this looks. This is a really neat way to get those troublesome areas, get something quilted in them that's not just a straight line or an almost straight line. It really is very nicely done. So one other thing we can do with this feature is do an open path. And this would be handy if you have a border strip, not a complete border, but maybe a border strip, maybe a complete border too, you know, depending on your taste, because we can do some really neat things. When you run out of ideas and you need something else just to see what it looks like, this is a really neat feature to try. So I'm going to do open path quilting with the curves feature in a section that I've got blocked off to the right here on my quilt. So let's take a look at that. I first need to cut my threads here. And I'm going to go over to the right where I have just a, I think it's a almost a 2.5 inch tall or 2.5 inch high section, and I've got maybe 12 inches, and we're just going to play around here to show you some of the neatness of what we can do. We go into line quilting again. This time we choose open path, and we're going to pay attention to our delta X and delta Y values that are in the brown box on the left-hand side of the screen. It comes in important or becomes important when you're doing this kind of work. You don't have to measure things out. You just have to pay attention to the offsets from one point to the next. So I'm going to set my first point right about here. And then I'm going to move down and to the right. And I'm moving down to about right there, and it says 2.38 minus 2.38 on my delta Y, and I'm going to move over so that my delta X is 2.37, 2.38, so it's a 45-degree angle. I'll choose that, and then I'm going to move up, and I'll do 2.3, it's 2.35, 2.35, I'm going for that delta X value, getting it pretty close, good. And then I'm going to come down again. And this is a little bit tedious, I have to admit. There's worse things though, because you only have to do this once. And 2.3 something something. That's pretty close enough. And then down again. And let's see, 2.39, 2.47, coming back. I'm just getting those so that I'm getting it as close to 45 degrees lines as possible. Why? No particular reason. I suppose it could be a little bit off. You can play with that, but I was just going for some kind of precision and to highlight the fact that we have those delta X and delta Y values in the brown box so that you can use those if you like. All right, so I've chosen my points, I've chose open path, and I'm going to say done. And okay, done, perfect. Now let's just hit the pin cushion design once, maybe twice, and I'm going to say both sides, and then I'm going to say maybe 5 steps, maybe 4 steps. And there we can put that in our sashing, and I do want to include the straight lines because well, do I have to? You know what, I'm going to open it up so that I'm not going to quilt the straight lines. And let's see what that looks like. Let's quilt that out. So I'm going to Save myself a little time, get back to the beginning here, press move to start, pull up my bobbin thread, and press go. And away it goes. A lot of times when I'm doing a quilt, or when I've done quilts in the past, I'm always at a loss of what to do in certain areas. There's always something tricky. And that's really the genesis for and the purpose for this kind of fill feature. It allows you to do some pretty, it is simple. I mean, it's just curves, but if you try to freehand a curve that's as graceful as this, it's pretty much impossible unless you're a well-trained professional. You can do it with rulers and so forth, but here we don't have to go to software to design something for this space. We can be right at the frame, just choose our points and try out all of these, designs that we're making with the curves feature. We can just try them out and see if it looks good. And if it does, great, quilt it out. And if it doesn't, if it's something that you really need to sit down and work at a computer to do a better design, you can do that too. But at least this, I think this will serve 85 to 90% of our needs as we quilt. I really do. So there you have it. That's the curves feature within line quilting. I think it's a great addition to V3 and I hope you enjoy it. So until next time, happy quilting.